I know so many of us are so busy, either physically or mentally, that if we would just take a few moments just to calm down, start to be aware of your breathing, close your eyes if you feel like it, feel yourself sitting on the chair, notice where your feet are making contact with the floor. Start to notice all the sounds that you hear, the cars, the breeze, the fidgets, just notice them. Notice the air touching your skin. Notice how good it feels to just settle down and breathe. Just to breathe. Sometimes I try to imagine or even try to remember what that very first breath I took when I came into the world. That precious first breath. And sometimes I try to imagine what it must be like when I don't know how many breaths I have left, which is even true now, but to actually be dying and notice that every breath could be that precious last breath, making every breath so important. It turns out everybody dies from exactly the same cause, the failure to inhale. And fortunately, we'll continue breathing even if we forget about it, which is a good thing. I forget about it quite often. So just look around and see a group of us who've gathered tonight, and I have so much respect and appreciation that you've come out and use your time and effort and money to show up for a subject that usually, if I have 5 people in the room, it's a lot. So I appreciate and respect that you've taken the time to be here. Can you hear me fine back there? Great. So I'm guessing there's 2 possible reasons that you're here. Either you're here because you want to prepare for your approaching death, or you're looking for if there's a reason why you'd want to prepare, if there is such a reason. Anybody here for another reason? You thought it was a Tantra workshop? Okay, good. The most known thing that we're going to die is seems to be one of the least known things about. And that doesn't seem right to me. Especially given that I saw a statistic that said 400 people die every day in America from accidents. What that means to me is that 400 people went to bed last night not knowing that they would die today. And that 400 people would go to bed tonight and not know that they're going to die tomorrow. And so on the next night and the next night. And of course, we are so filled with information. I would say this is not the age of information, this is the age of overload information. That when we hear a statistic like that, it doesn't really mean that much to us, because we don't think that statistic is about us. We think that statistic is about, that happens to other people. 400 people going to bed tonight and dying tomorrow in an accident are not any of us. Actually, I like to say that I've actually spoken to other people and they don't think it's them either. So who is it? Who is it? It's 400 of us every night. Reason enough in my experience to want to do some preparation. If you were going on a trip, if you knew you were going on a trip, most people tend to plan for a trip. Maybe you're going to decide what you're going to take with you. Maybe you learn a new language. Maybe you learn some new skills. Maybe you talk to people who've gone there, been there. And this seems like the biggest trip of them all. But for some reason, most of us, certainly in this culture, do very little to prepare for it because we've got plenty of time. So tonight I'll have two sections. The first section, I want to explore with you some of the beliefs and stories and understandings and misunderstandings we have in terms of how we view death, dying, dead. And the second section of what we do tonight, we'll look at advanced directives, designating an agent, information you'll need, or someone will need when you die in order to be buried or cremated. We'll look at some of that information and any other information that we want to hear about or wants to show up. Okay? So first I want to know who's here, because it will be helpful to me and it'll be helpful to all of us to know who's here. So if you know someone who died in the last 12 months, will you stand up? And real quickly, will you let's just go around and say who that person was and what relation you have with that person.
My neighbor died a week ago. She was found dead on her stairway. She's younger than me.
And her name?
Pat Matsumoto.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've heard about that. Yeah, neighbor, huh? Thank you.
John Fowle, a dear friend who started the Insight Meditation Center in New York City.
Thank you.
Mark Waterbury, a good friend here, and Bob Dilton, very, very deep beloved from Montana.
Thank you.
My mother-in-law, Maria.
Thank you.
I'm Martha. I recently lost my husband, my best friend, and my father. And my husband died a very sad death alone in Thailand. So thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you.
My precious friend Karen Joy, and my sister.
Thank you. You could sit down after you say who it is. Please.
Be home. He's a fellow mankind brother.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
The son of a mainland friend named Brian who drug overdose suicide.
Thank you.
Dear friend Glenn Hunks, who passed away on Kauai a week ago.
Thank you.
My friend Piero passed away. And, good friend.
Thank you.
Both Pat and Piero.
Thank you. So,
Oh, yes, Tabulator. Anybody know Tabulator?
Sure.
William, you only know him as Tabulator, but he was a really dear friend from the islands and a really good artist, and he passed away 2 nights ago.
thank you.
Piero.
Thank you.
Dot Buck.
Thank you.
My sweet friend Alani, who died of cancer a few weeks ago.
Thank you.
Tulio Elia Luisa, my grandfather.
Thank you.
Caress Newport, friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
My friend Susan died the night before. She was having heart stent surgery.
Thank you. Thank you. Will you stand up if you know somebody who's currently dealing with a life-threatening illness? good, thank you. Will you stand up if you're helping care for somebody with a life-threatening illness? Thank you, beautiful. Will you stand up if you work in the field in any way? Will you say what it is that you do?
Taking care and counseling people through hospice or through better care place.
Thank you.
I'm a massage therapist and esthetician. I am a CNA and take care of the elderly, and I'm on hospice training.
Thank you, beautiful. Lucian?
I take care of Ram Das as he prepares for his death.
Thank you.
I do outreach and education for Hospice Maui.
Thank you.
I'm a volunteer at Hospice Maui with patients and in bereavement support group, and I'm a volunteer with Orient Light.
Thank you.
I'm also I'm also a volunteer with Hospice Maui.
Beautiful, thank you. Ms. Helen?
I'm a hospice volunteer. as well.
Great, thank you.
I'm a hospice volunteer.
Great,
I'm a psychotherapist. I've worked with geriatric population and their families.
beautiful, thank you.
I'm currently a caregiver and am sort of a magnet for death.
A magnet for death? Wow. I have never met a magnet for death. Will you stand up if somebody close to you died before you turned 20 years old? Who was that?
My dad.
His name? Of course.
I was
12.
My father, Peter, I was 8.
Wow. Thank you.
My grandmother, I was 11, and my grandfather, I was 13.
Thank you.
My grandfather.
Thank you.
My grandfather Ken was 10.
Thank you.
My grandmother, Annie.
Thank you.
My grandmother and my grandfather.
Oh, thank you.
Grandmother and friend Susan.
Thank you.
High school friend.
Thank you.
high school friend and 4 grandparents.
Thank you.
Grandmother and a boyfriend.
Thank you.
Grandfather and an aunt.
Thank you.
Hanai uncle. I was only 10.
Mm-hmm.
Best friend when I was younger.
Thank you.
All 4 grandparents and a friend in high school.
My mom when I was 19.
Thank you.
Both my grandparents and a friend in junior high school.
Thank you.
My father, John, when I was 11.
Thank you.
My grandmother.
Grandma?
Yeah.
Thank you. Will you stand up if you've had an MRI, a CAT scan, an ultrasound, a colonoscopy, a mammogram? Anybody have one of those? Anybody have one? Very good, thank you. I had an MRI last year, and I never have anything. And so I was like, an MRI was this huge thing, and I started asking around and was just shocked to find out how many people I knew had MRIs, and it was just like, MRIs. And so, and how many of you had that experience, maybe all of you, that you were waiting for the results in a certain apprehensive way that the results of any one of those tests could have certainly changed the course of your life? Yeah, 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 yeah. I want to speak to a little bit about what else I know is or have a good idea is also present in the room. I know there's anxiety, or likely there's anxiety in the room. Not only, I mean, tonight must be anxiety about what's happening in Iowa. But certainly, certainly there could be anxiety about the condition of the world. the condition of the future of the world, what our children and grandchildren will have to deal with or may have to deal with. And then there's anxiety, there may be personal anxiety about your own personal health. I meet people who have, let's say, a stomach ache, and they're afraid to go to the doctor because by now we've maybe all met people who had a stomach ache that just seemed like a regular stomach ache and turned out to be something much more serious than a stomach ache. So I meet people who would rather not find out or are afraid to find out. Certainly there's fear. Anxiety and fear, I think, travel together. I could tell you some of the fears that I've run across in my work. In considering approaching dying and death, there's the fear of uncontrolled pain. Although hospice, and now I would say hospice and the medical field in general does a tremendous job of helping people not die in pain. Suffering. We as a culture don't want to suffer. So there's a tremendous amount of fear about suffering when we find out when we're dying. In fact, what I notice is that people are becoming less and less afraid of being dead, but are absolutely terrified of finding out they're dying and terrified of actually dying. And in fact, for the most part, we equate finding out you're dying with suffering, which is something we could explore, that we think finding out you're dying equals suffering. Which is why oftentimes if you go visit someone in the hospital, sometimes there's a sign on the door that says nobody is to tell the person that they're dying. And that's certainly more prevalent with children who may be dying. Because we equate suffering with knowing that you're dying. But we all know we're going to die, right? I don't know if that's true anymore. I don't know if it's true that we know we're going to die. If I looked at how you live your life, and in fact, if I look at how I live my life, would I see obvious indications in how you live your life every day that you know you're going to die and you don't know when? That's a very big question. It's a guiding question for me now because oftentimes I don't think I know I'm going to die, even though I'm around it quite a bit. I know other people are going to die. I see that. But oftentimes when I look at how I actually live my life every day, I'm not always in that awareness that I know I'm going to die and I don't know when. And I know the people around me are going to die and I don't know when. And I know my wife's going to die and I don't know when. And I hope and pray I die before my children and my grandchildren. But that's not a guarantee either. So, in order to prepare for death, which is the theme of what we're doing here tonight, we have to at least know we're going to die, and we don't know when, so that it's not just some concept, oh yeah, we're going to die. Oh yeah, we're not any of those 400 people every day. There's grieving, certainly grieving in the room. We've been holding a monthly meeting here for 8 years, and I'm amazed what shows up. Just amazed in how much so many of us are grieving, not only personal grieving. I've met women, more than one woman now, who is grieving an abortion she had 40 years ago. I meet people who start grieving over something they didn't know they still were grieving from 20 or 30 or 40 years ago because something triggered that grieving. And anybody who's paying attention, who could not be grieving what's happening to the world, to all the other species, to the planet, to the water and air, and to the earth. So it would seem to me there's grieving present in the room. Regrets. It's likely if you have kids, you have regrets. They kind of go together. You know, there's hope, there's wounds, unresolved relationships. And we'll get to that later, because that's where a lot of the suffering shows up when people are dying. Because we're all leaving a trail. We all have a trail. And that trail is either filled with love and respect and honoring and appreciation and, you know, and sometimes it's got resentment and anger and on and on and on of people you didn't complete or resolve or work on an unhealed relationship where somebody still needs you to say I love you, or I'm sorry, or please forgive me, or I forgive you. Then too, there's what's present in the room is that which shows up as anxiety or fear is kind of the shadow. That an example of the shadow would be, I knew somebody who did all the things you would imagine you'd want to do that you'd stop eating Twinkies, that you'd do yoga, you'd have a spiritual practice, you'd have right livelihood. You had good friends, you lived in a clean environment, and you spent time in nature, you exercised, all that, whatever that mental checklist is for you on how to be healthy and live a long life. And I knew a person who had all of those things checked off, and all of a sudden died within months from cancer. And I saw a community go into collective shock, but nobody was talking about it. So when nobody talks about something like that, it goes into the shadow. And nobody was talking about it because, well, I don't know why they weren't talking about it, but what they were thinking was, well, she had all those things checked off on her list, and I do eat a Twinkie every now and then. What about me? And that wasn't being talked about, but that was kind of the collective shock that people went into, that here was somebody that seemingly did everything you'd think you'd want to do to avoid getting sick. And honestly, I haven't seen any rhyme or reason as to why some people get sick and some people don't. And I haven't seen any pattern as to why some people get cancer and some people don't. And I run into people that eat McDonald's and drink Pepsis all day long and smoke 2 packs of cigarettes all day long. And I've seen people get old living that life. So I don't know myself what to make of it, although I know I feel better if I don't eat and drink that stuff. Some other things that we have either fear or anxiety about is whether we lived a life of meaning. And some of the suffering that I see is people finding out they're dying and realizing they've never really had the life they wanted to have. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't get to live my life. I was either living somebody else's life for me, et cetera, et cetera. We're afraid of losing control. And in general, I would say we're all, to some degree, control freaks, whether we think so or not. I think it's one of the elephants in the room that we We want to have a sense of, even a sense of knowing what's going on, and I think for the most part, we don't know what's going on. But we want to be able to claim knowing what's going on. And we want to be in control of how it plays out. And it sure shows up when people are dying and losing control. So that's where fear of indignity shows up. Because indignity often is connected with the ways we lose control and the ways we become incompetent. And we're very addicted to competence. In fact, we value competence so highly in this culture that we start to not value people when they, in our eyes, become incompetent. Just as what we've done to people as they age in this culture, older people become kind of pushed off to the side and, in a sense, worthless, because they may not be as good as something as they were 40 years ago. And maybe we've all experienced that in our own bodies and our own minds. Which is not either a bad or an unusual thing, but in a culture that is so values competence, we become less valued, and in fact we value ourselves less. We become invisible, useless in a certain sense. Especially what I've noticed is as women age, in this culture they become less useful. The other fear is, and maybe you've experienced this, is if you've ever felt that maybe you were dying.
I'm so sorry, I've been looking 45 minutes for him. He always follows me, I'm so sorry. I'm so glad he's alive. That's amazing. That feeling of maybe you were dying and life was traveling on this train and you weren't on that train anymore. Ever had that experience? People are making plans and thinking about next Tuesday and these plans for their children and their grandchildren, and you're not on that train anymore because you don't have a future. That can be scary. Okay, let's do something different. See if I have enough of these for everybody. Will you pass those around? Okay, everybody got one of those? I want to read something to you by a man named John Welshons, who's written a number of books. This is from a book called When Prayers Aren't Answered. Our culture has believed that acknowledging our mortality will make us depressed. As a result, we haven't really thought about our mortality. But if acknowledging our mortality made us depressed, we might assume that not acknowledging our mortality would make us pretty happy. If that were so, why are more than 20% of the people in our culture taking antidepressant medication? That's 1 in 5 people. And the psychology and psychiatric communities feel that there are millions more people with undiagnosed depression who, in their view, should be taking antidepressants. When we add in the estimated 15 to 30% of people who are addicted to alcohol and narcotics, we wind up with an enormous number of very unhappy people in this culture. As a rule, happy people do not have to take antidepressants. Happy people do not become addicted to alcohol and narcotics. This simple fact is we have been wrong. Thinking about our mortality isn't what makes us depressed. Not thinking about our mortality is what makes us depressed. Or more accurately stated, it is not thinking about our mortality that allows us to live in the illusion that we have time to be depressed. I better read that sentence again.
Yeah. That's awesome.
More accurately stated, it is not thinking about our mortality that allows us to live in the illusion that we have time to be depressed. And while depression is not unusual for people diagnosed with a terminal illness, the awareness of their mortality often spurs them to find a way to transcend that depression expeditiously. And I've witnessed that that is true, although oftentimes family members or doctors want these people to take antidepressants when they're dying.
What?
As if there's something wrong with being depressed when you're dying. So you're looking at this paper. Do you think that what's on that paper is true? And why do you think it's true? If you do think it's true. Anybody?
Just because having an awareness of death along with your life plans is what mattering most, is what, I mean, that makes sense, right? Like having an awareness at all times, like when you're going through and you're making your plans, you're gonna be able to enjoy it, what you're doing most, or pick out what means the most of the things on your to-do list to do.
Please.
Something about about what you just said about having the time to be depressed. There's something I want to work out in that. Like, I think it's got to only be if it's not genuine. Because if I'm, or like, why you're depressed? Are you depressed? Like, why? Because if I feel depressed and someone tells me, well, how do you honor that? How do you honor where somebody's at in a genuine way and take this into account?
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Not to me.
Like he doesn't,
Wait,
he wants to honor
wait, please. You speak. Please.
Well, it sounds invalidating to if I'm feeling depressed, I'll feel invalidated if someone says being depressed is selfish, or being depressed is this belief that I have all the time in the world to be depressed. And if I was really in touch with the fact that I'm gonna die and I don't know when, like, why would I waste time being depressed?
Well, I wouldn't, I'd take it more internally than thinking somebody's going to lay a trip on you about it. If that paper I handed out is correct and makes sense to you, then would depression fall into what matters most? Or would you find a way out of your depression?
Yeah.
Not to say that sometimes depression isn't chemically based. And sometimes depression is a state of, let's say, moving through anger and sadness towards resolution.
Right. I think that implies like it's in my control.
Yeah, maybe it is.
maybe it is.
Anybody else? Please.
Well, about what he's saying, people do lay trips on you, and when you're in extreme grief, some of that component is being severely depressed, where you can't get out of bed, you can't function, you can't work, you can't do anything, and you don't think you're ever going to be better. If you do everything you can and you do get better. But well, I remember when I was going through that, people, oh, snap out of it, you know, get yourself together, go out and take a walk, let's get together. It took a long, and then another death, another hit in the stomach. You get in your boxing and you fall down, you pull yourself up, and that's why situations like this are good, because but so many more people need to be aware that when somebody is in deep grief, you know, not to pressure them to shorten it or snap out of it, or, you know. I kind of concur with this gentleman.
Yeah, I hear that, and I'm not at all implying that you're wrong to be depressed. It's not in the realm of wrong or right. But if you combine depression, now I'm not talking about grieving. Certainly depression can show up in grieving. And maybe it's not true in all forms of depression, but I would say in general, depression wouldn't find its way into the middle of that circle. We'd find our way out of it, and we often do. Anybody else? Please.
To me, this illustrates how valuable time is and how valuable life is. If there's not an awareness of death, there seems like it's kind of an endless supply of time in life, and this kind of illustrates to me that there's an end to that. So I guess that's what puts it in perspective and frames what is important, why we're here.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Please.
It says awareness of death, but it also says awareness of life. For me, it's awareness, period. It doesn't have to be of death, of life. It's just awareness of everything that happens in your life, and death is a part of it, and so is life. It's just one. And a lot of people seem to not want to be aware of all these things because it's maybe too scary, or they don't want to go there because they have a comfortable life, or they have this routine that they go through every day. And so it's a little bit of a, to me, this is a little bit more limited than the way I look at it.
Thank you. Yeah, I hardly meet anybody that wants to die. And I meet people in tremendous pain that want to hold on to life. But I do meet people that want to die. Please.
Well, I just kind of ran through my, to-do list, in life, what I want to do, what I want to become. And somewhere on that list is to patch things up with my daughter, who hasn't talked to me in 7 years. But it's kind of sunk to a low part on the list. I'm kind of like, well, she'll come to me when she's ready. Whatever, it's kind of low on the list. But if I add to that the awareness of my death, that just goes bing, right to the top of the list. And it's just adding the awareness of something that is real. So that's why what's in there is what matters most. That would help my perspective in my life, bringing that awareness.
Great. If you get nothing else tonight, you got something right there. And I've been at the bedside of dying people that want their son or daughter to fly 3,000 miles so they can have that kind of completion.
And sometimes the time works out that way, and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, great. Please.
You know, Bodhi, I don't know if you told me this statistic or not, but I did hear that 89% of the people in this population think death is an important issue, but only 37% want to look at it. They're interested in knowing more about it. They're just wanting to keep it away, which I think is fascinating, even though they think it's important.
You might catch something if you talk about it. And some people say that to me, that you'll attract it if you think about it, which is a bizarre understanding. If that were true, all my friends would be billionaires that sit around and think about money. Yeah. Anybody else have a comment about anything so far? Please.
I'm just thinking today, coming here, I was like, it was just like the first time when I would go to, a long time ago, to a hospice meeting, and it was just like, even today, it's just so, it's normal, it's the most important thing for me to do, to be here tonight. There's nothing more important. As there's nothing more important to sit by somebody's passage, is happy, because it allows true understanding about being in this moment, and I feel like only here I really can feel that, only in this circle or in the work, and it's very easy to slip out of that, and it has happened, and it pulled me right back into this place where I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than be here, and just like that.
Great, thank
Just
you.
the awareness, and I know why, because there is an awareness that's happening, being around dying people and being in our circles, that is just so broad, and it just becomes again the most important thing. Before I go out of this planet, I'm grateful to have this time that I know that I cannot have anywhere else as potent as it is here with you, with the hospice people. I just don't know any other place. So I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. And I'm grateful the circles are getting bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought of something about what you said, because for me, what I see is working in the world of death and dying and having more an awareness of death increases my intention to be more in awareness, which you could say is awareness of life, or you could say is awareness of life and death, or you could say is pure awareness.
I think about this every day. I'm
And
grateful.
And something brought you here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, please.
Yeah, just one little quote from an anonymous guru one time said we have it really kind of backwards. We celebrate when people come into this world, and we're really sad when they leave. And he said it should be just the opposite. We should be really sad that someone has to come in and experience it. We should be really happy that onto the light, into the next. And it's just a good way of looking at life and death.
Thank you. I don't agree with that. Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Because this thing about depression, I've been sitting here kind of stewing with it, because I grew up with a brother who eventually took his life and was dealt with depression and multiple attempts of suicide. Have you ever been depressed? Really depressed?
No.
Yeah, I don't think you can make comments about it, because that's the understanding I came to with him. But I had no understanding, because I haven't experienced it either, and I really could not understand the life he had to lead, and therefore I could not really talk about it in the way that you're talking about, that you can. This means you can snap out of it. It's really
I didn't write that, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hear that.
It's definitely not on my to-do list.
being depressed.
Well, it's probably not on anybody's to-do list. Yeah.
I just I see a huge area on this to-do list, which is showing that like our life is pretty broad, and there's a lot of things in our life. So there's a lot of things that may not be good, but they're real, like depression, if somebody's going through that. And from like what I see on here, this isn't saying that anything about depression, like as far as like that it's a bad, horrible thing that you're going through it or anything like that. It is horrible for the person, but I just see that it's just saying that if you have an awareness of your death and you realize how precious life is, it can help you. Like your time on your list and what you're all going to do is going to be very different. So you might not do a lot of the things you might not do. So some people might have trouble getting out of depression, but maybe let's say if it is really chemical, they're going to figure out, like if they have the awareness of death, no matter what ailment is causing, what thing is causing their depression, they're going to be able to have the most help to get out of it if they have that awareness of death, because they're going to realize that that's not in the middle, maybe something like that. Like, so not saying like that some of it's not chemical, some of it's not this or that or whatever. That seems like to be on this whole portion of like the to-do area, you know, of like that's just life, us living life. But like when we come to that awareness of death, it just really makes a just more like of a distinction of what we focus on. Like I just know that I've been going to the NVC classes and talking about just people that aren't depressed, and you are thinking a lot more of you know, like not of death in that class exactly, but just you're thinking of positive, like just for like, yeah, like 5 positives for every 1 negative, you know, it's, or something like this, you know, to really be a happy person. But that's aside from this class. But I just can see that I might be sad, and that's in this to do, and I am crying about mourning for my mom and all of that, you know, but eventually I'm going to come, you know, come out of it, and then I can go and when I'm focused, when I'm really strongly aware and connected with death, then my focus is different. I might still have a moment where I revert back. It's not like every single second you have to like be in what matters most.
Okay, bring that to a close now.
Okay, that's all.
You good?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
May I say one more thing about
sure.
depression? I have never been depressed. I'm a total optimist and positive thinker. But when depression hit me, I thought I was dying, and it was okay with me that I was that ill with depression. And the good thing about depression is when you get better, how much you've learned to appreciate life and have compassion for those that are depressed and give them their time with it. And it makes you appreciate being well and happy and have drive again. So I have to look at that and say, thank you for the time I went through that, because now I have empathy and I am so much happier to be well again.
Thank you. It's such a bigger subject, a bigger scope than what we're going to take on here, because in that context, I see a lot of people, especially young people, that are lost. Maybe don't find meaning in life given what is happening in the world. What's the point? How can I make a difference? Or a sense of I can't make a difference. And that's a whole scope of, that's in the realm of depression. And I see lots of it, especially in young people. But that's not the scope of what we're really going to spend any more time with here, if that's okay. Take in this exercise that breathe in, and while you're breathing in, say to yourself internally, death is inevitable. And when you breathe out, say to yourself mentally, I too will die. And do that for a few moments. Breathing in, death is inevitable. Breathing out, I too will die.
Okay, good. Anything come up for anybody in that practice?
Fear. What came up for me is it took me right back when I was 30 years old and I watched my mother die, who had not let go of anything in her entire life on any level, physically, emotionally. And watching this soul trying to break free through the myriad of layers of what she had held on was a horrifying thing to watch. And it just snapped me right onto a path, and I said, I'm gonna start letting go now.
Mhm.
And I realized that when we were doing this, that I've been preparing to die since that moment, since that time, because my life has been about letting go, letting go, letting go. And it's not something, it was made very clear, it's not something you wait until the last minute to do. There's so much to let go in life so that you can be free too. And it was the biggest teaching, I think, of my life.
Thank you. Somebody over here said fear. Who was that? Can you say a little bit more?
I go into terror.
What did you say?
I go into terror. I mean, even as a little kid, when I first heard about death, going into the terror, it doesn't happen that often, but it still does come up. Just of not existing, I don't know. It's not the process even.
Thank you.
I can relate to that.
Say that? Say what?
I can relate to that. That comes up for me too.
Thank you. Anurag?
I'm doing so much every day to stay alive with the conditions that I have, and sometimes it's just too much. And what came up in the exercise was that I'm trying to avert the inevitable.
And?
The two facets or whatever come up with it. It's like, yay, I'm just gonna do whatever I want to do. Stop trying so hard, and just let go in a way and enjoy and let the inevitable come on in. I mean, and then part of that feels like a giving up also. So it's kind of two-edged.
Thank you. Yeah, is there a difference between surrender and giving up? That's a great exploration itself. Because when you say working at holding off the inevitable, it's like, well, why bother? Because maybe you like your life.
I do, and there's sometimes when I feel, fuck it. It's just, and then maybe I could like it more if I wasn't trying so hard. It's a balance,
Thank you. Anybody else have any kind of experience in that practice you want to share?
I'm not ready yet.
What?
I'm not ready yet.
Okay, good. Will you let us know when you are?
If I have time.
Okay. Please.
When I was breathing out, I just felt this huge sense of relief and peace. So, yeah. I don't think a lot about death. I'm 82, and I've had, I've been told in the past, when I was 23, I had malignancy throughout my lymphatic system. 1956, I'm still here. And so, somehow though, when I was breathing out, I had a real sense of relief and peace. And I guess that was it. I haven't figured it out. I'm not very mental, so maybe I'll think it through a little later on.
Great. Great, thank you.
I've been doing this practice kind of on and off for months, and it brought up a whole new thing when I started putting other people in the out breath, and saying, death is inevitable, like, my father will die, or Ram Dass will die, or, which, you know, I wonder, like, why am I disconnected from I too will die? And then it's like, when I put it on someone else, it's like, oh, holy shit, like, that's what I have to experience. If I die, I don't have to experience the sadness. Somebody else dies and I'm there to witness it, it's like, that gives me the shakes.
Yeah, did your mom come up for you?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll go through my whole family when I'm doing that and just be like, name people in my family or people I love. Or
Cool. Anybody have resistance to the practice? Please.
Just internal resistance, like my mind would like go someplace else really, really quickly. So I'm excited to sit with it more.
Great. Great, thank you. Anybody else have any resistance to it? Come up. Please.
More of a list of, oh man, I gotta take care of shit before this happens. So like the responsibility kind of, right? So not so much a resistance to doing it, but that feeling of more shit to do.
Thank you. We are such doers. Just thinking we might die one day means there's more to do. It sucks.
Advanced directives.
What's that?
Advanced directives.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Why is even the word death, to me, it seems to be such a taboo word. You know, why does the car die, the tree die, the dog die, but grandma transitions or passes away or passes on or graduates? What is it about that word?
It's very final.
Yeah? Death, dead, die.
It's all final.
Is it?
It seems that way.
But if you study nature, and I do study nature, it doesn't look like it's final to me at all. In fact, I can hardly separate it from life. I can't really.
I think it goes back to being control freaks, because it's going into the mystery. We don't know, and for control freaks, that's not comfortable.
So it's easier to say transitioned or.
Yeah.
And what does passed away even mean? Please.
I don't think there's enough soul in the word death. And just today I picked up this book called Deathing. This is just the best book I've read on the subject. You probably have read it. But it's, I like this word better, deathing. It's softer somehow and more acceptable.
Yeah, because many of you know I have a store called the Death Store. And
I don't know how many times people have said, I love what you're doing, but you can't call it the death store. I mean, people under 40 think it's pretty cool that I'd call the store the death store. But they're still kind of in the immortal phase. But if I called it the passed away store, or the till we meet again store, that one I've heard a few times.
You'd have a lot more people coming in.
I probably would. I'm probably shooting myself in the foot. You want to say something?
Yeah, it feels like a similar like cultural aversion to grief that the word death has. Whereas if you say passed away or transitioned or whatever that is, it kind of like subverts that grief in some way. Yeah, it feels
That's
like
good.
an unwillingness to be with it.
Now, I understand that for those of us who recognize that there is no death, like I'm one of those people, that there is no death, but in that same breath I'll say, and there is death, because if there wasn't death, I wouldn't sit here and I wouldn't invite you over for, let's talk about it. Because clearly, in my view, both those things are happening. And to say that one of them is either more important than the other, or to say there is no death, and that's the whole truth, is to bring about, to me, words like transition and graduate and maybe all of those things are also true. And we die, and we're dead. I've seen dead people, so I know it's true. Just like, and now people come to me and say, well, you know, science is going to make it so we can live forever. Now, I understand that in this culture, we don't have any sense of the taboo or the kapu. And so if science can do something, they will. If they can split the atom, they will. If they can genetically modify everything, they will. And if they can make it so we don't have to die, they will. What I don't understand is why people would think that's a good idea. I don't think it's really been thought out. You know, how would that actually work? When would you stop getting older? Or would you just keep getting older? It doesn't make sense. In fact, to me, it's another example of how confused and disconnected we are, that we would think that makes sense. Now, it is true that we're living longer. Only 100 years ago, the average lifespan was 51. Right? I mean, quite a few of us in this room are way past 51. Right? And that was only 100 years ago. Right? That was our grandparents or our great-grandparents. It's not that far back that it was 51 years old. And, of course, in 100 years, people may sit around and going, could you believe it, 100 years ago, people only lived to be 80. When they lived to be, what, 150 or whatever it is. The way the world looks right now, I don't know if it's a good idea to want to be around here. And I have grandchildren and have great concern for the world that they may have to live in. So sometimes when we do this exercise of I too will die, somebody will say, well, it's just not true. And I agree. It's not true. There's a part of us that knows that we don't die. But when people say, oh, it's just your body, and I used to say that too, it's just my body that dies. Even that doesn't make sense to me anymore, because in my understanding and my experience, there's a universal consciousness that permeates everything. Whatever name you give to it, as some people give awareness or the holy or God, etc. And if that universal consciousness permeates everything and is eternal, then how come only this dies? And it seems to me we've gotten enough reports back that, and enough indigenous cultures talk about how your mind is still pretty active for a while after you die, until it finally dissolves. And when somebody like a friend of mine commits suicide, maybe because he was so depressed, it would seem to me there's cause for praying for that person's mind in that state for, and the Tibetans would say 49 days, at least. And I think that's where some of the images of hell and heaven show up. And maybe in one of the Caring for the Dead piece, we'll talk about the dead, because we're one of the few cultures that doesn't have a relationship with the dead. We think the dead is kind of a funny superstition, for the most part. So do we know we're going to die? That seems, in preparing for death, that would be a core piece. Do you get up in the morning and live your life like you know you're going to die? I can't say I answer that question yes every day. But I often do the practice of, it's a Buddhist practice, that when I get up in the morning, I ask myself the question, is this the day I'm going to die? It's a phenomenal question. Is this the day I'm going to die? I don't have to have an answer to the question. If the question is real, it changes the rest of my day. It doesn't turn me into a morbid person. I think I have a very happy, optimistic, I love my life. But to ask myself the question, is this the day I'm going to die, is a phenomenally powerful question. Because most of us wake up in the morning, wake up each morning unconsciously in the assumption that of course we were going to wake up. Of course we're going to wake up. Even though plenty of people go to bed tonight not knowing they won't wake up in the morning. In the world tonight, people don't wake up in the morning. But most of us take it for granted. In that, what you could call entitlement, we think we have lots of time. We deserve 78.5 years of life. And anything less than that, we've kind of been robbed. So why do we die? Why? Why do we die? We have to answer that question because we either see or experience death as seen as a punishment, a mistake, or a failure. I mean, still in hospital settings, for the most part, if you die in a hospital, it's because all of the technology in medicine didn't work. Medical technology and medicine failed. Sometimes the cause of death is failure to thrive. You failed? When you died, you failed? And we think, oh, we don't relate to this death as a punishment thing, but it's certainly embedded in the culture. It's certainly embedded in our very creation story, whether we relate to it or not, that after we got kicked out of the garden, we were told that the wages of sin was death. And we were told it was a punishment. We didn't have to die until we sinned. And that creation story still is embedded. Because a lot of times we get sick and we think we did something wrong or we're being punished. I run into that all the time. We'll see a turtle with a cancerous tumor on his forehead, but we won't assume that turtle did something wrong. Or we see a tree with a, some root infection, and we don't assume that tree did something wrong. But we do it to ourselves and each other quite a bit. We did something wrong. We're being punished. So why do we die? Come on, somebody knows the answer to that. No, not you. Not you. Yeah, I'd call on you if your answer was really this short. Do you have like a one-sentence answer to that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it.
Sustainability.
What?
Sustainability.
Oh, a one-word answer to that. Good. Okay, very good.
Otherwise,
I'd ask you to say more, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Anybody else know why? Oh, please.
Well, I wouldn't say no, but I could say for me, when I sit here, all the exercises we do, looking at this picture, thinking about do you die, do you not die, what arises in me is love. That there's like the to-do list, and then awareness of death comes into that, and what comes up is that this is a very finite opportunity to have a body, that maybe after the bodies are all continued, maybe the ones I loved who have died, maybe they're continuing, but they're not in my bed, and they're not at my dinner table, and they're not, for me it's different, for them it might not be. So to me, when I breathe in, I will die, it's inevitable. What happens is I wanna, wow, wow, how short and wow. And if science made it possible that I knew I was gonna be here in 200 years, I would be sitting there doing compulsively responsible me. I'd be doing on my to-do list. I wouldn't have bothered telling you when I got here that I'm nervous because I'm not breathing well. I would have just said, oh, you'll see me. So to me, someone who is essentially a loner who wants to be by myself, my awareness of death comes in any of these ways. What I realize is how precious that you're here right now. And so to me, that's
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Even if we get to live to be 200, 400 people are still going to die in an accident tomorrow. Yeah.